Hello yet again for another Conversation With series today with myself and David Hubert. Today we have the esteemed Harvey Newman. Harvey Newman is a big YouTuber. He's also a veteran game developer with the specific privileges of working with animation. And he's worked on titles such as Horizon Zero Dawn, Battlefield, Warhammer, and lots of other titles, which we can get into obviously in the stream. Lots of knowledge, lots of experience, and with a very interesting twist, the fact that he's a content creator. So, someone like Jandini Haas, who also is quite prolific in the VFX industry. Somehow Harvey manages to find the time that, I don't know how, but he finds the time to also produce a great deal of content for the web, which is really great. If you haven't checked out his channel, you really should, because there's a lot of really good stuff on there. So I'm going to bring in David, as I usually do, and then we'll bring in Harvey, and then we're going to get this conversation going. David, what's up, buddy?
Oh, hey, Brent.
Hi, surprise.
I'm good. Are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I feel like this is becoming a bit of a thing. Like every week, there's going to be a moment where I'm going to surprise you with a stream, and you will be there. It's it must be scheduled or something. I don't know what's happening, but it seems.
I don't know. For me, the surprise is listen to your introduction, and then I'm slowly drifting into something else, and then I hear my name and I see myself.
There I am. I'm supposed to be on there. Okay, well,
that's my cue.
I just like to keep you on your toes.
Glad to be here.
Well, welcome back to yet another one of these conversations. So we're going to bring in Harvey, and the VFX budget is not big enough to have explosions and stuff, but we're just going to bring him in and get excited. There he is, Harvey. What's up?
What's up?
Yeah, it's a high tech transition we use. It's called just a quick fade. So
quick fade.
Yeah, we're going to upgrade later.
I feel like a Hollywood star. He's great.
You are definitely a Hollywood star. So
Brent,
welcome.
Brent, we do have a team of VFX working on those explosions, right? When they're
yeah, for sure.
Okay,
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Great. They're getting well paid as well.
Oh yeah. No, it's any day now. It'll be yeah. Just keep waiting. We
just ask them, please show us 30 different versions, and we'll just take our laser pointer and decide which one it is.
Yeah. We'll just snipe with a laser pointer from our ivory tower, the one that we want the most, and let everybody figure it out. Actually, it's a little tricky to really do anything too spicy in here in Restream, because it's really meant for the kind of the multi-guest kind of layout, but like we don't have as many cool things that we can do like we do like on like a Twitch channel where you can actually use overlays and all these other things.
Yeah.
I hope that one day they add that kind of support, because it'd be kind of cool to add a bit more eye candy. But you know what, today, Harvey, you are more than enough eye candy. Wow, I can't even say the word eye candy. It's such a cheese joke.
Brad.
I can't even say it properly. Yeah,
I appreciate it. Coming from you means a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, yeah, I don't know how you would like to get into this. Maybe like, maybe for those who don't know you, maybe you can kind of just give us a brief, condensed version of you in a nutshell to get us kind of, to set the stage, and then we're going to dig into anything that kind of comes up that seems like a good thing to get into.
Sure. Yeah. So, like, my name is Harvey Newman, and I'm a gameplay animation director, like an animation director for games. For all those that don't know, I've been in the industry for about, 18 years, 15. I don't know. It's been a long time that I've been like in the games industry.
The fact that you don't know the number is exactly evidence that how long it's been.
Yes. and yeah, I've been animating for games for a while, loving it. Yeah, it's been an amazing ride, going through all the stages, the different stages of animation. And yeah, now I'm working for a company here in Scotland called Build a Rocket Boy. This is where I reside right now. And I do YouTube as well. That basically resumes my career.
Actually, YouTube is how I knew about you in the first place. That's the first time that I saw your current content. I remember that maybe I'm wrong, but I think the first video that you've done since that you got really inspired by the release of God of War, and you're like, oh my God, I need to do something. So there's two different questions in my mind. What was the exact process, and inspiration in general? But can you describe it first? Is it accurate? And how did it happen from playing again to I have to start a YouTube channel?
I actually say it.
It seems like a big leap to go from that. Like, okay, I'm gonna like start a gigantic journey that it will never end because of this one game.
Because of this one game. No, so it was not God of War that started it all. So I was thinking about like starting a YouTube channel for years. I guess like most people nowadays, right? Because YouTube is such a big thing now.
Yeah.
And I remember like back in the day, do you guys remember Casey Neistat? Like a big YouTuber, right?
Oh yeah. Well, he's still around. He's still pretty big.
Still around. Yeah, exactly. He's not as active as anymore, but I remember that. Well, I always wanted to kind of like finish my end years of animation as a professor, perhaps in university, sharing knowledge and all that good stuff. And something clicked in my mind after watching one video of Casey Neistat when he brought Will Smith into his studio. And Casey is pretty much my age, like early 40s. And if I was to meet Will Smith nowadays, I'll be freaking out as well. I mean, I grew up with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and all that good stuff, right? He brought him into the studio. He was freaking out, asking him all kinds of questions. Will Smith was acting like a superstar. They leave their studio, and there was always a horde of teenagers in front of like Casey Neistat's studio. Not one person, not one teenager was looking for Will Smith's signature autograph. They were looking for Casey's. They completely ignore Will Smith.
That's so funny.
Will Smith felt really embarrassed.
I remember
walked to the crowd. Walked to the crowd and then went to his limousine or whatever.
Yeah. He played it off like he did a pretty good job, like rolling with the punches, making kind of a joke out of it. But like, you could tell it was like, ooh.
You could tell it was weird.
That stings, yeah.
And that was the moment that I thought, like, there's a whole new generation. There's a whole new amount of animators coming through, and this is the best way for me to actually kind of like share the knowledge, much more so than going to university and teaching and all that stuff. And it was that point that I thought maybe one day I'll start a YouTube channel if I have anything good to say. I just didn't know exactly how to start it. And for some reason, I still don't know why, after playing God of War, I got so inspired because it's such a good game that I've decided that that was going to be my first video. Right. And then I started making that video, and it took me a good 6 months to finalize the video. But just YouTube, as you probably guys know, YouTube, like animation, is never really done. You just put it out there and hope for the best, and you just like cross your fingers.
Yeah.
And funny thing is, you have the thought that when you put it out there, everyone is going to know about you, and they will judge you and like basically your career is going to be done and you're going to look like a fool.
Yeah.
And you think it's going to be the worst thing. And then you put it out there and you realize all of the 2 people that watch the video actually have, one has something to say, maybe a comment, and there's about 2 people that watch the video. And that's when you realize, you know what? No one really cares about what you're saying. Let's just make more of this stuff just for fun.
Yeah.
And
that's funny.
That's how it's done.
Feels a little bit like the same with like Twitch streams are like that too. It's like, it feels weird. You feel like you're going to be putting it out there into the universe. You're like, oh my God, like, I mean, everyone can hear what I'm saying. And then you realize that there's only like a small handful of people in there. And it's the same people who come back every time. And then it's all you're really doing is hanging out with a bunch of like-minded people that like to talk and chat about the same thing. And then if you keep going down that road and keep building that brand, if it's a brand that other people like, that crowd just gets bigger and bigger, and you climatize to that as it gets bigger, probably, right? Like how, like where are you at right now as far as viewership? Because I've seen your numbers grow quite a bit over the last little while.
Yeah, I'm like close to 10,000 now. So I'm not growing as much as others, but like,
but like
I think it's still a good number.
Yeah,
right?
it's still not small. Like if you were to tell that person day one that you'd have 10,000 subscribers, that would be like, you'd be like, there's no way that 10,000 people are going to want to listen to what I have to say. But there definitely is.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like the first 100 are the people that are the number that you actually share is the most. The first 100 people that follow you, because you get to have 2 people that watch your videos, maybe they found it somewhere in YouTube in a corner somewhere dark, and then it starts growing. But the best thing that I found about YouTube is that, like, I got so disillusioned when I put the video, because I put so much work in this video, and then you get like 2 people watching this video. It was probably more than 2 people, but like you get 2 people watching your video and you're like, maybe it's not worth it. And I think that's when people go down the YouTube, like they kind of like turn around and like, now the YouTube is not for me. But what I found is that the best way for you to do YouTube is just the same way that we all did animation, which is the best animation comes out when you do it because you want to do it, not because you're doing it because of a job or a show reel or a specific intention. Is because you want to have fun and you just want to express yourself. And since after a few videos, I realized that I had to do this for me, independently of how many subscribers I get or how many viewers I get. And the funny thing is that when you think about it that way, then all of a sudden you're more real towards camera, because you're just doing this because you want to actually kind of like explain something or put a thought out, and then you kind of go, I hope it rings through with somebody. I don't know if it will, but if it does, then great.
It's like you're kind of more doing like almost like a visual dial. I mean, sorry, it's like a diary.
Like
you're just
like an audio diary.
Writing down some, like, you're just speaking out loud some thoughts that you have, and then if people want to listen, they can. But otherwise, it's really for you. It's therapeutic, probably.
Exactly. Like my next video is going to come out tomorrow, and once again, shameless plug, but
do it.
It's about taking notes, animation, and taking notes, and the art of taking notes, and how people, back in the day, people used to take notes and they used to share their notes with each other, to the animators, and how important it was. Milt Kahl shared some knowledge, and you take some notes, right?
Those notes used to travel throughout the animation lands via Xerox copies. Quite literally, because it was way before the internet was a real thing. And I still have some of those. As a matter of fact, I want to do a stream where I'm going to go look at all of those from back in the day of my 2D animation days. I have like a stack like this of all these old ratty pieces of paper that like were handed down and handed down and handed down.
100%. I remember that completely. That was like amazing. That was the beginning, before Animation Mentor.
Way before Animation Mentor.
I used to learn things. And this is what I talk about in the video, basically about like how I take notes and how I think about notes and how important it is and all these things. But when you say it out to camera and you put it out there, it's almost like a reassurance to yourself that what you're saying makes sense, especially when you see the edits in the end. Like, this makes sense.
It's a great exercise. It's a little bit like teaching. I mean, when you decide to teach, you're like, okay, well, I have 10, 15, 20 years of experience. That's going to be easy. I'm going to teach them that, and start to analyze it and like, wait, how am I going to describe this? Why am I doing this? What makes this thing work and not the other? And you kind of have to dive very deep to kind of put words on some ideas and concept that you have that you do naturally, but you forget why you do it, and you also realize all the holes that you have in your own workflow. That I kind of skip over that because I'm really fast and it doesn't really show up at the end. Because but I really struggle with this part. Now I have to teach it. I don't want to do it. So just the going through the class preparation and teaching is forcing you to become better. And I feel that for you, it might be a little bit the same thing with those videos. Just going through all of those themes is good to give, but it's good for you as well.
Yeah, completely. And I also, the teaching is exactly what you mean. Like, I also have this workshop. Once again, sounds like I'm plugging myself, but I'm not.
Feel free to.
I have this workshop, and I have like the students that I have to kind of do one-on-one mentorship. And it's exactly as you mentioned, David. Like, when you have a student, especially that doesn't understand a concept, for you to break down that concept to its very basics, so someone that comes brand new from animation has to understand spacing in animation, right? How do you explain spacing in a way that makes sense to a student that just gets started? Like it's like explaining wind. Right? It's difficult. It's really difficult.
Or explaining a color.
Like,
how do you do that without the word of like what? Explaining red. It's red. What?
Yeah,
oh my God.
Red.
I see the problem.
Yeah, and it just makes your brain work in a completely different way. But because you explain it, and especially when things click, you probably guys know this. When some things click to a student, you can tell that it just makes sense. And then they portray it in their work. It feels like $1 million. It feels like
for sure.
Turns out the stuff that is here makes sense to others as well, and it's just not myself.
It's there's a thing that comes up a lot during these little conversations, just because it's I feel like people that have enough years of experience, like I think all three of us would qualify as having a good number of years of experience. We are a bit more comfortable with the idea of talking about things like imposter syndrome, and I think that teaching and putting yourself, because what you're doing on your channel really is kind of, it's teaching in many ways, not always, because there's a sort of a mix of entertainment with education in your content naturally, with like most YouTubers of the kind of topic, the types of topics that you get into. But by putting yourself in a position where you need to like be teaching something, there's a lot of self-doubt that happens, because as David's saying, like as you start to inventory your process and you start to realize, holy shit, it's like Swiss cheese. Like how do I possibly explain like elegantly how I don't know what the hell I'm doing during this phase? I just sort of make it more red, and like how do you do that? And so it's interesting because it does force you to reorganize information in your head so that you feel a little bit stronger in your own processes. But it can also be a little bit nerve-wracking to kind of put yourself out there, because like, who am I to say these things if I don't even necessarily know for sure how to do them, right?
Yeah, and you always have that like second guessing, because imposter syndrome happens no matter what stage you are in your career, right?
Oh yeah, it's always going to be there.
Yeah, as soon as you expose yourself to something new that makes you feel off balance, the imposter syndrome kicks in, and then you're like, what's going to happen with my career now? And YouTube is exactly that. Like if I expose myself to the world and I start blabbering about all these things that I think are correct, who's to say that people out there are not going to look at my stuff and be like, this guy is full of rubbish. Why are people looking at this stuff? And then is he actually kind of misleading people coming into the industry? Maybe instead of being helpful, is detrimental to people coming in. So all those things go through your mind in every single video I make, especially the more edgy ones, like talking about salaries or talking about something a bit more, right?
Controversial subjects like this are going to obviously create a little bit more possibly negative attention.
Exactly. Because people might say like, this guy's completely wrong. Like, who is this guy to tell me what it is? I know better because I have more experience, or I worked here or whatever.
I like to think at least if there's people like you that are willing to put it out there, at least it starts the conversation. Because the problem is, I feel like on these kinds of topics, no progress gets made because people keep their opinions to themselves because they're too scared to share for the same reasons that you're saying. It takes brave people to go and say, you know what, I'm just going to say it. This is what I think. But like leave themselves open so that like if you would like to discuss this, like go ahead and say it in chat. Let's talk about it, because I think we need to talk about these things. And I think that it's important. And I think that we need those moments. Like at the end of the day, you're never going to make everybody happy, right? Not everyone's going to like your content, and that's obviously something that you obviously got used to that idea a long time ago. Otherwise, you would have stopped. And
That's it.
the key is there are going to people that do like your content, appreciate you for who you are and what you bring to the table. And it's like you just have to forget about the haters, man, because at the end of the day, the haters are usually the ones that just sit there bitching and moaning and they do nothing about it.
They
So
don't know exactly. Yeah, they just know how to moan really well. Professional moaners.
exactly. And good. Let them moan. Let them moan,
Let them
man. The
moan.
rest of us are going to move forward.
That's exactly right. And what you mentioned about like putting it out there, like that's like the games industry, unlike the film industry and VFX, as you guys know, is not as documented or known of as like film, right? So like, you know, you have the behind the scenes in Pixar movies or DreamWorks and stuff, and people can get a general idea what it is to work there. Obviously, not all is roses and pink, but they can at least get the gist that is fun. In games, there's no such thing, right? In games, people just go inside animator and they disappear.
I agree. I totally
and then
agree.
you don't know anything about it and what they do exactly do. Do they do the same thing as in film? No one knows.
Yeah.
So for me, coming in as a fresh guy into the games industry, there was a lot of bad stuff that happened because you have to learn as things go. And it happens to most people, right? You actually get into a professional job and then you have a horrible job boss, and then you actually get thrown under the bus and you have to learn as you go and you have to pick yourself up, all of these things. And I thought it was probably best for me to tell people how it is to actually be in games and what to expect, and also the good stuff and the bad stuff. So people know that if you actually want to be a gameplay animator, not all of it is good, right? So there's some stuff that is bad, and here's the stuff that is bad. And I hope that if someone had told me that back in the day, it might have not hurt so much. It might not have crushed the dream so much. Because I consider myself someone positive, that after this many years, I can still be positive about it and can still be like, wow, I love my job. But as you guys probably know, there's a lot of people out there that go into the industry, no matter what industry they go into, they get chewed in and spit out. And then that dream gets destroyed, demolished, and it's really horrible, right?
Yeah.
So maybe having that set of reference in their head by the time they start in the industry might help them out a little bit, I hope.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it is, because I've definitely seen both. I've been a little bit in VFX, mostly in animated feature, and a little bit in game as well. Even if it was more on the cinematic side, but you know, we're side by side with the dev team
for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, but I can assess that the level of brutal crunch time in games is something that I had never seen. I know that there's some there's a lot as well in VFX. I've not seen myself, but I've heard. But if I compare with animated feature, there was some crunch time for sure in every production that I went to.
Yeah.
But in games, it was on another level. It's like,
it lasts longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels that it's this big marathon that is very hard to manage. And at some point, you're like, okay, now we have 6 months, and it's almost like it's so difficult to predict and manage that you always end up being 6 months from the end and like, wow, we have like 2 years of work left and there's 6 months. So let's do that. And it kind of played sometime in the culture of, you know, all right, those are troopers, they stay until 2 a.m. every day, and almost like a pride that was getting out of that, that you almost get into, and you start to feel it. They're like, ooh, I'm not sure I understand the thrill, but I'm not sure I enjoyed this specific taste of going back to bed at 4 a.m. on a long period of time for too many days.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. And you know what? Like, I feel like, at least my experience so far has been that the reason why that happens is because the games industry is really young. Right. And I don't think we have been through like the 50, 100 years that film has. You know, if you actually hear the stories about like Walt Disney's 9 Old Men and how much they worked in the beginning, that is very similar to what games are going through right now. Right. It's like this unlimited crunch because you need to make sure that a project is done, and it's done when it's done. But there's no like clear sense of planning. And some studios are better than others, but everyone is trying to figure it out. Or how it is, right? And I feel, thankfully, that we're actually getting into a new phase. When I started, no one really paid attention to the talent. It was very much about like, you come in, we pay you a check, work hard, and then get the job done. But now most AAA studios are actually understanding that retaining the talent is the most important thing that you can do. And you can only retain the talent if you keep them happy. And those things are like connected, right? And that is changing the industry in a big way, because all of a sudden crunch is something that makes people unhappy. So how can we solve crunch and actually get, so the development cycles are becoming longer because games take a long time to, you cannot develop a game in 2 years, and that's what every company wants. But big companies are trying to understand that actually if you want to make a good game that makes an impression, you need at least 4 years to make a game, maybe longer. And then let's plan for those 4 years. And then to not have crunch, you need a bit longer again. And I think those are welcome changes, but still there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of figuring out at the moment. This is why you get a lot of crunch.
And I think that's something that fights a little bit, because yes, we're gaining, it's still very young, although now it's a couple decades, but at the same time you have technology that is evolving exponentially,
changing the rules all the time.
I mean, it's not even game from game, it's in between the game. You have a game that's going to change the decision as you're building it. And there's also like the explosion just of a game in general. That means that now there's more and more budget. Well, what you can do with 100 million is very different than what you can do with 20 million. And if you're a past game, if you had the team that create a very successful 20 million game, now it's kind of the same core team, but you have 5 times the budget, 5 times the expectation, and a new generation of console. It's not starting from scratch, but it's fairly close to be starting from scratch because it's so vastly different. So the parallel with the early Disney days is great. At the same time, in between the first few films, there was some technology advancement, but it's nowhere close to what we have to deal with.
Engines, engines are changing all the time, and it's a very good point. And what happens as well is that then if you have a successful game, right? So let's say you have 20 million, and then your game made 100 million. Then the publisher, whoever publisher it is, they'll be on to you to actually make the same number 2 more successful. So recreate that exactly, but just make it more successful. And if that's successful, then it becomes a chain, right? Because now we want that game to come out every 2 years. And it's like, well, we made the first game in 5 years. How can we make it 2 years? Well, in order to be profitable, you need to make it in 2 years, and then pressure is on. And this is what makes games or gamers or developers kind of unhappy, because all of a sudden you have to make the same content, which is twice as fast, because certain people don't understand that even though you're making a second version, you cannot just plug and play the stuff that you had before. You have to create new assets, everything, right? If you want to create a new thing. So,
and this is for teams that are in the best case scenario that would do the same type of game. There's many studios that we've developed a MMO. Okay, let's do a shooter now. And you have the same team. And it's like, okay, let's go with this direction completely. You again with the parallel of movie, you can do an animated feature that is in space, and another one that's going to be in a completely different story. Most of the acquired knowledge is going to be, you have to make your research in a different direction, but most of the tools and knowledge is the same. You change the type of game you're making. I mean, it's almost like let's trash a lot of the code and let's just do new stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, that's crazy, because it's so true too. Like there's this misconception from a higher up often that it's just local, but you got a team of devs. Like it's like, just because I have a hockey team and there are a bunch of athletes does not mean I can put them on a soccer field and expect them to score goals. It just doesn't work like that. Or sorry, I'm speaking to someone from the UK. Football.
No, but I understand.
But I think that it is this weird thing, and I feel like the same thing happens with animators. Like I feel like if you think about it, like a lot of producers in my time have like totally misunderstood like why you can't just take a cinematic animator and plug them into gameplay and vice versa. We can touch a bit more on that later. It's a subject I really want to get into, but it's funny how there is like, it doesn't work like that. Just because you have animator in your title does not mean that you can just suddenly just hit the ground running on a completely different type of thing, right?
Completely. Yeah, no, being a gameplay animator, once again, this is why, another reason why I created the channel is completely different, and you need a different set of skills.
So different. Absolutely.
Different set of skills, and it's beautiful in a different way. And some animators get disappointed because when they go into animation for games and they expect they have the same linear pipeline, of like, I get time to plan my shot, I get time to actually then showcase it. And the way it's going to be showcased in game is going to be like a cinematic. But if it's a gameplay thing, gameplay animation, it's not going to be like a cinematic. It's going to be a sequence of animations that are going to play together when you press X on a specific moment on a specific place. That's when your animation is going to play, right?
Yeah.
But getting to know that and getting to love that takes longer than it takes when you get into film, because in film you just see it straight away, right?
Some people might not. Some people get into the game industry as an animator and think that like that sounds really cool, and then they're subjected to it and they're like, "Ooh, no,
this
actually,
is not
I'll
for
go
me."
back. I'll go back to movies. Thanks. See ya.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, animation is difficult no matter where you put it, but there's a simplicity to how much the film industry has grown and how linear the pipeline is. That you just go in, you sit in your chair, you have your supervisor, they tell you what to animate. It takes you a week or a few days, and then you showcase it, get your notes, do it again, and so on and so forth, right? There's a simplicity to it, not to bash anybody, because that's amazing. But games is very much like uncertain. You have an engine in between, you have different departments, and different departments are telling you different things. And your animation broke the engine, broke the build. Why did it broke the build? How do you implement the animation? There's a lot of stuff going on.
Oh yeah, so many moving parts.
So many moving parts. But at the same time, if you love multitasking, if you love to be independent, if you love to own a piece of content, that stuff is really, really cool, because you don't have such thing as a supervisor in games. Normally, your leads will actually distribute the work to the animators, and they expect the animators to put things in game. Yeah. So you get a saying not only on the animation, but also how he plays. And if you once again, God of War, when you throw that axe and it feels excellent, if you're the animator animating that stuff, people are going to love your work because you did that animation, and it feels good because you made that feel good, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you just did the animation. It's every studio is a bit different, but like I'd like to think that a lot of animators were part of that system. Like it's like the whole look and feel of throwing the axe was just as much contributed by the animator as it was, say, the engineer who was building the feature and the designer who was sort of tuning it. It's like it really is a team sport, you know. And there you can't. One thing that's the hardest, I think, for animators in the games industry is understanding that they don't have quite so much of the full control over their shot or their work, because it's not like you said, you don't just make it and you polish it to the point that it's as good as it can be. And yes, of course, you have the tricky part, like the hard part of navigating, I think, feature films is that you have all these different inputs about what the shot needs to be, right? But at the end of the day, it's like at least it's a linear thing. Where it gets a little bit more complicated, imagine doing the same thing, but now it's not just a whole part, but it's like you're animating with a team of people. One person's job is to animate the fingers. The other person's job is to animate the eyeballs. And then when it all merges together, it should be a full, complete experience. And you have a lot more voices interacting with what they want. Like you get designers, you got producers, you got directors, you got game directors, you got animation supervisors. It's like the list goes on. And these are coming from completely different perspectives too, right? So you might have a designer who's got all this feedback on your animation that's like seems antagonistic to what the animation is supposed to look like, and then you know what I mean. How do you even resolve that without making your animation look like a
completely? Navigating that environment is incredibly difficult. Exactly for the things that you said, because sometimes you find blockers in the most like unseemly things. For example, level design, right? Like if you make a crouch animation, you need to actually pay attention to how low the crouch animation goes. Because turns out cover is only that high. And you made your animations, made 100 animations, you made them all to this cover instead of that cover. So now you have to go back and actually rework your stuff because you didn't read the design documentation when you should have, right?
Exactly.
So those are the kind of things that you have to think about. And then you have to actually explain to the designers or to the level designers why you made that choice. And it gets even more complex when it gets to the senior or lead animator, because you have to explain those things and you have to fight it off in a way. You have to actually be the person that kind of like goes, I think this is better because of these reasons. This is my case. Present your case.
Absolutely.
And let's discuss.
Yeah, there's a real art form to that, man. Like it's like you can't, like you got to be confident enough to understand like what it is you're like when you're being told by a designer, for instance, to make the cover work for 12 inches high. At some point, you're going to have to be like 12 inches high. The character's 6 foot tall. Like I know that you want that, and I understand that you think that makes sense in the game. but we're making a realistic looking game. So therefore there are limitations to what I'm able to do with that character before it just falls apart on screen, right? I have to answer to the art director and the creative director too, not just you. Trying to make this really cool design. Like I'm not here to poop on the design. I think it sounds like it would be a lot of fun, but I just can't. The intersection, the animation lives between the creative directions and the technical mechanical directions of the gameplay mechanics. It can be a difficult pinch.
Exactly. For me, it was one of the most interesting part of being in game. It's because you have just witnessing a conversation between a programmer and an artist, and with each one of them on the extreme side of creativity and binary 1 and 0. There's a right and a wrong way to do things, and on the other side, it's like, well, we're trying to find beauty, so it's all in shade of gray, and when they kind of get to the agreement that programmer would be like, okay, we're in agreement, this is what we're going to do, and then the artist but if we look at from another perspective, and then it's just freaking out. It's amazing the level of different kind of mindset that have to be put together to create a game.
It's amazing that games even get shipped because of this, because of the juxtaposition of perspectives.
No, I completely agree, because the amount of because animation, as you mentioned, animation lives in between technical and art right now, and everything that moves in game, well, not everything, but virtually everything that moves in game is actually up to the animation department to do it. So you have to be the one to explaining to others why these things make sense for animation. But other people, including game directors and people that are in charge and are playing the game and are making the game, they most of the time don't know exactly why animation needs to be a certain way, or needs to function a certain way, or needs to be or they don't understand why they can't get what they want. Like how comes you cannot do this if this other game had it, right? But the amount of things that we need to do in tech that we need to do and people that we need to hire, it's impossible. Let's be realistic about these things. So we can get this much, but not that much, right? Sometimes it goes the opposite way. They ask for the world because we have a massive amount of budget, but we only have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of people. So we can go this much, right? And you have to constantly kind of juggle, because I like to do the best animations possible, but it's almost like being a basketball player or a F1 driver. You have to kind of know when to accelerate, not to kind of burn out your tires, right? Have a certain stamina, have a certain kind of vibe, because this is a long game and we have to be here for 3 or 4 or 5 years. So we have to plan things well. We have to know exactly when things fall when, and we have to be realistic about the stuff that we have, budgeting, mocap, hand key, what is fast, what is not, how can we push? There's so many questions all the time. But this is exactly why working in games is more exciting to me than working in films, because you can get to do all these things. You can get to discuss with other people. You can get to make decisions. You can get to actually, I like to have my team come up with their own ideas and just surprise me, do something that is cool. And if it's cool to them and if it's cool to me, then I can actually put across the thing, we need to do it this way for these reasons. And then if it goes into game, the team feels better, the animator feels better, and he's amazing, right? So.
Yeah, that's one of the things in games that I witness as well. The level of if you are proactive and you are talented, the level of not power, but you can have a lot of responsibility if you decide to take those responsibility. Maybe compared to in feature, well, this is your shot, and if you do well, you'll have better shot. If you're an animator, for instance, in a game, and you have good level design idea and you have good idea of system, and it's almost like you can have a big impact on the game. Even if you're just a mid-level animator, if you have good ideas, good people skills to properly communicate them, being resourceful enough to be able to prototype a little bit on your side and show it to convince the design team or the creative director. There's a lot that you can achieve in a game. There's a lot of space for artists in the game.
I dropped something up on the screen here. It was from chat. I thought was pretty funny when we were talking about the juxtaposition of different perspectives. It sounded like the beginning of a classic dad joke.
That is true. That is true. I'll love to actually kind of. This is basically my talks every day. It's not in a bar, but that's pretty much me every day.
It's funny because I often just jumping on what was just sort of said. I often say that making a game is hard because, and it can be very difficult because it's like you're trying to like build the tracks for the train as the train is literally heading down the track. It feels like this. And you don't even have a map, because most of the games I know of, the reason why it takes so long is not because yes, there's a lot of work, but it's amazing how much work can get done in a short period of time once the team fully understands what they're making. This is the number one part that's hard. It's like, at least in linear storytelling, they can work on story, they can do storyboard meetings, they can put the story up on a wall, and they can sit in front of it, and they can debate it, they can pitch it, they can tune it before production starts, right? Video games are a lot harder because they're bigger, there's way more moving parts, and because it's interactive, there's a lot more edge cases. It's not a linear experience, so it's much more difficult. And I think as an industry, like you said, it's a new industry. We haven't figured out, the game industry in general, I'm going to get some hate for this, but I'm sorry, it's true. We don't know how to make games well yet.
I think you just have to mention vertical slice, and people in game will understand exactly. You need a piece of the cake to make sure that the developer knows exactly, or
Otherwise,
actually sees that you know what you're doing to give more money. But to do this piece of the cake, you need the cream that you plan to do 2 years after, because this is not the important. You need flour first. And all that.
That's the joke of vertical slices.
Yeah, you have to
give a sample of the game before the game is built. And like, I'm sorry, how do you do that? You can't, like, nine mothers cannot produce a baby in 1 month. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, that does not how it works. It takes time. And so just to follow up on the thing I was saying, yes, it's difficult for these reasons, but it's actually, to go what you're saying, Harvey, it's also the most exciting reason why games are fun, because it's like, the fact is that you could be part of the people deciding where the track gets laid. You have a say in this, and you have a lot more influence over the direction that this freight train is heading, just by speaking up and leveraging your expertise and finding ways of collaborating with the teams that are around you, and finding the common ground between what would otherwise be a large amount of disparity between perspectives between the departments. Like, find that common ground, celebrate it, and then find a way of actually, heading forward as a team.
The sense of ownership that you get after the game is shipped. It's incredible. It's really, really good. Like, you don't have your supervisor, director kind of telling you like minute notes about your shot, and you kind of starts to feel like it's their shot instead of your shot. There's none of that in games. In games, it's genuinely like, if you actually put it in game, it's because it's working. If not, then you go back into Maya, you or work it out, and you keep on doing the same thing. And if you actually put it in and it works, and everyone design code and everybody is in agreement that this is a cool move, let's do this, and this is great, let's move on to the next thing, then you actually were the one that made it happen. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a really good feeling, especially after all these fights, or all these discussions, I should say.
Constructive criticisms and
constructive criticism. After all those things, it feels like you made something special, right? And that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. The payoff is big.
Yeah. And one of the thing in game is that you'd like to vent on the weekend with your friends and talk about the game, but there's so much secrecy that there isn't much you can say anyway. So kind of stay vague. And what is the IP again? Oh, sorry, I cannot say. What type of game? Sorry, I cannot answer this question either. And so you have to keep it for yourself, or discuss among the people from your team. The level of secrecy in game, especially if you spent like a decade in animated feature, that they will announce exactly what it is like a year before, and you almost have little production diary as the film is being made, and all that. You go in game, it's like, no, please sign here with your blood. With blood, nothing can be said about nothing.
I think the reason why there's no behind the scenes in like development diaries, there's more of it now, but I think the reason why is because it's a mess.
I knew you were going to say that.
Like, why? Why would you like to see it? It's horrible.
Getting to see how sausage is made sounds really great on paper, but then when you start to see it, you're like, what? Actually, you know what? I don't think I need to know. Just send me the game when it's done, and I'll enjoy it then. Yeah, it's so true. It is
like
messy.
Enjoying a blood sausage, right? It's like, oh, it tastes great. You definitely want to know how it's made.
No, you don't. You just skip that part. It may ruin it for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why the Double Fine production diary series was so amazing. I don't know if you've seen this one, Harvey, with the game A Broken Age, but I was like, wow, for the first time, I can relate to what I see. They are suffering too.
Every single studio that I've been is always the same thing. and the game normally comes together right at the end. It's funny.
Yeah.
Because
That's the great. That's the scariest part.
Because it feels like Brent mentioned, like, you know that penguin in Wallace and Gromit laying down tracks real quick, right? Yeah. It feels like every department is that penguin, and then we all going from like very far away, and we hope to meet in the middle. And everyone is just like laying down tracks as best as they can. Yeah. And then right at the end, it just goes click, and you're just like, wow, we have a game.
Yeah.
This is cool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it goes in games development. It's insane.
It's so true. It does. It just feels like complete chaos. And I'm a broken record. I always say this, but the soundbite is overused. But I always feel like at the beginning of every project, you're on a team of clearly inspiring, experienced people that you're like, wow, like I'm such a great team. But when you start trying to make the game, especially if it's a new team, it's like, it feels like it's everyone's first day on the job. You know, it's because it's like, it's awkward. And this is why you see a lot of these teams that are like Ninja Theory, these teams that are small. A lot of people are like, the big fad these days. I mean, David touched on this a little while ago. It's like, you as well, Harvey, this idea that it takes 3 years for a reason, right? It's because it takes that long to make these games. But at the same time, and that was by stretching that out even to maybe 4 years sometimes, is the industry's way of trying to answer the problem of, well, if it takes that much time, but it's always killing our employees with these crunches, well, why don't we just live with the fact we should take a little longer to make it, you know?
Exactly.
And but the other way that people are trying to solve this problem is by saying, well, or why don't we have a smaller, more agile team and scope the game more accordingly? Not having these gigantic Assassin's Creed-like games that are just full of so much content that it's very difficult to compete with. Instead, let's go with a slightly different model and maybe charge less money for it. There seems to be a big wave of people, like what I call, there's sort of like there's a fun name that they've sort of branded recently. People that are in the space, it's sort of somewhere between a AAA space and an indie space. They're like these medium-sized companies that are often formed out of like people from the big AAA, and they merge with a bunch of people that might be coming up the ranks from the indie, and they try to find this hybrid approach. And I think that that's an interesting way to go too. But the one secret sauce to that seems to be, if you're having a smaller team, you really need a team that not only have a lot of experience, but preferably a lot of experience working together. This is the Ninja Theory's big win. Infinity Ward, same boat. They have a team, like a small core team that have been working together for a really long time. So they're able to like finish each other's sentences. They could order for each other, on the menu when other people are showing up late to the lunch meeting. They know each other pretty well. They understand how to make a game together. Just like a team on the ice, right? People need to know how to work together.
Completely. And I'll go further on that as well, to elaborate on that as well even more. I think something else that is actually makes these studios even better is being independent. So I know the Ninja Theory is no longer independent, but I think the best work that came out was when they were independent, right? Like Hellblade. It was almost like the pressure of the studio about to fail kind of like they decided to just go like, whatever, we're just going to do the game that we want to do, and we're just going to make it the best we can. And that pressure, together with being independent and like having free reign to do whatever, Hellblade came out, and that was really cool. And there's a lot of games out there like that actually have that mentality that we're going to do the game for ourselves. And if we do it for ourselves as developers and players, then maybe the audience will like it as well. Instead of having a publisher on top of you saying what you need to do, when, how,
micromanage and
hyperanalyze and all that stuff. And another thing that you can see in the game development as well is that if the developers had fun creating the game, you can feel that fun by playing the game, and that's true 100% of the time. Like,
I definitely agree with that.
That work really, really well, like you were saying, that actually gel, that actually kind of like have fun doing development. Those are the teams that make the best games. And the teams that are under pressure, crunch, all these things, that dysfunction, you can also tell in the game, right? Like Cyberpunk is the latest example that everyone is talking about.
Yeah, I think that's true for any creative production, to be honest. I just think that it's more difficult in games because, again, the juxtaposition between perspectives. There's not a lot of common ground between many engineers that I know and animators. They're such different people. There is a common ground. That common ground is a love for games. They're probably all players, and so they need to be able to find a way of appreciating that that line there. But like usually the programmers are typically, and I'm averaging here, but they are usually the ones that are dealing with difficult problems all day. So they're wearing headphones because right next to them in these open floor concepts are these these loud animators that are running around
And
shooting
it's
video
all loud.
references.
That's true.
And it's like those two people like literally would never choose to hang out together at a party, but yet they're forced together into this room and they're told to make a game together, and they should be, you know, have fun while you make it too, because that's the secret sauce.
That's the
It's
secret
like, holy
sauce.
shit.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Like,
How do
it's
you
hard
do
to
that?
grow a company culture in a way
Yeah.
that allows that to happen naturally. And I think part of that is being maybe a little selective with who you hire. And I think it's tricky.
Yeah, and you know what, Brent? Like, I feel you probably found this as well, but like I feel like there is a few programmers, engineers that I call them the daywalkers, and I've only found two that actually know about like obviously the engineering side, but can also talk the animation lingo. And
Dude, don't even get me started.
they try to be like, okay, so what do you guys want to achieve in animation? We want to achieve these things. It's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Now let me translate that to my colleagues.
Yeah.
In the department.
No, exactly.
I had a brilliant engineer, Tom Barry, and shout out to Tom Barry if he's watching this. He works right now at Microsoft in the Midlands at Rare.
Stole him from us all.
Yeah, exactly. Tom Barry, amazing dude, and he was that guy. We would go to Tom Barry. We would go to Tom and be like, Tom, look, we need to solve this issue.
Yeah.
And this is the reasons why. And this is why we want to actually do it. Can you please talk to you guys? And then Tom would go and be like, this is why animation needs these things. You're like, yeah, but we told them. Just like, and then he will go into engineer mode and be like, well, this thing doesn't work. That thing doesn't work. This system and that system are competing with each other. This is why we need these things. And the animators are trying to tell you that.
Exactly.
You're just not listening. It's not the right words.
It's not the right words. Exactly.
And then Tom will make it happen. And then he'll come back to us and be like, it's sorted. Well, let's make it happen. And we're like, yeah, thank you.
You call them daywalkers. I call them unicorns, because they're about as common as a unicorn. They are. I'm the same. I have maybe 3 or 4. I'm going to do a shout out to Jeet Troff right now. He's the legendary animation engineer that I've worked with. He's since gone on. He works for Santa Monica Studios now, and he's now a game director, which goes to show you just how well he understands games. And even the animation part of that. It was not a surprise to me that he's doing that these days, because he had a much higher level perspective. But it's a little bit like, almost like going back to analogy land here. It's like you're trying to disarm a bomb, but the person across the table speaks Russian, and you don't know a word of Russian, and you're gonna somehow, but you can't. Even that game, like, what is it? Something about you're gonna explode, or it's like it's a fun party game that you can play where like you are like they have a VR version of this where you can see the bomb. And you could explain to all the people, like, okay, so I see right now, and then they have like the instruction manual how to disarm the bomb, but they have to tell you with only words, but they can't see what you see. What's it called? Everyone Explodes or something? Why can't I remember the name of the game?
Is it like those? Is it like?
Oh, that's right. No, thank you, Mike Farts. I mean, you forced me to say your handle, and now I hate you for it. Keep talking, and nobody explodes. That's exactly the game I'm thinking about right now. Nice. That's what it feels like, making a game with an engineer who just is like going back to the idea of how do you describe red to somebody? That's what it feels like when you get an engineer that understands red without having to explain it to them. So you could just say, look, this is what we're trying to do. They're like, I got it, no problem. I'll go figure it out, because they understand all this very difficult, very nuanced part of the dialogue and description of what you're looking for. And I mean, those are usually people that come tap me on the back. I'm sitting in the animation director chair, and I get tapped by them going, hey, have you seen the latest run stuff? Because it looks like garbage in the game right now. And I'm like, wow, an engineer's coming to tell me that. That's great. Normally, you think that an animator would get their nose out of joint, because like, who is an engineer to tell me? I'm like, no, but it's because I know that they get it, and they're looking at it not from a technical perspective, and not only even from an animation perspective. They're looking at it from the game perspective and balancing all those things, and that's worth its weight in gold. So if you ever get your hands on one of these unicorns, hold on to them, because otherwise I'm going to come find them and steal them.
Oh yeah, for sure. They are really rare.
I'm not kidding. I'm looking for them right now. I'm looking for as many of them as possible.
Harvey, you mentioned that it's still a very young industry, and you've been in it for quite some time now. Let's say we fast forward ourselves 10, 20 years in the future, in a moment that the industry is a little bit more mature in the so how would you see, maybe not the game themselves, but game development getting to a mature point that, okay, we are more efficient, we know how would you what would be the difference with how we do things today?
That is a very good question. That's a very good question, a very tough one to actually answer. But I feel like games are we're going to reside in this world where we're going to have AAA games that are going to be longer. They're going to take longer to develop. And the reason why I'm saying this is because even gamers are now getting to the conclusion that I don't want the game now. I want the game when it's ready. And I think Cyberpunk, once again, was a good example of this, right? Because the gamers, for the longest time, they were like, when is the game going to come out? When is the game going to come out? I felt that when I was working in Battlefield and Battlefront. The level of pressure that you get about, like, if you actually promise a date, then and you don't deliver on that date, people get incredibly disappointed. And you don't want to disappoint a hardcore gamer because they are incredibly vocal. And also
very
vocal. And then I was on the flip side of the coin when I worked in Star Wars Battlefront, where you get gamers and Star Wars fans coming for you, which is like the two most hardcore fans ever, which is when they love you, they really love you, but when they don't like you, they really don't like you. So I think that gamers are now understanding that games are not really ready to come out when they want to. They are ready to come out when the developers are ready. So I think AAA games are always going to take longer. So I anticipate games taking 7 years, just like The Last of Us and all that stuff. Most likely longer, and maybe one game comes out every generation of the console. But when it comes out, it's like Ghost of Tsushima, which is amazing, right? So I think that's going to be one, and then it's going to be another section of the game where it's going to have the AA games, like the mid-level studio, that is going to be independent. And I think those studios can be more agile, and they're going to have less people, but they're going to have people for longer time, and those people are going to be able to work together so well. Like Hades. Like the game that came out, just perfect example. Independent studio, small team, incredibly small team, amazing game of the year everywhere, and it's not considered AAA, right? I mean, it was never considered AAA from the beginning because the team is so small, and they're not owned by anybody; they're owned by themselves, which is beautiful. But their staff has been there since way back in the day when they were doing Transistor and all that, right?
It's making AAA money, though. That's the
interesting. It's making AAA money. Exactly.
It was a AA model, is how they structure the team and the scope of the game. But like, it just goes to show you that, like, if you know, you knock that out of the park, and I mean, because it costs so much less to make, the profits are even that much sweeter because that, that's the bottom line.
And they just keep investing on their own company as well, right? Like they actually pick up those profits, put it on the next game, and they make it bigger and all that stuff. So I feel like that's where we're going to end up in. I do think that 20 years from now, when I'm a really old man, I think that people are probably not going to crunch. I think that crunch is going to be a thing of the past. At least that's what I hope. And if there's crunch, I think it's going to be very little. I think studios are going to know when to do it, and it's going to be most likely within a month or a few weeks to final the game, maybe. And I think, like the company that I used to work for, DICE, they did it the best, where they asked us kindly to, if you could, you should have overtime and all that stuff. Help us finish the game. But no one was forced to do it. And then they went above and beyond, and they actually kind of paid a little extra and gave people more bonuses, and there was motives and incentives to do it. Even then, most of the studio took the holiday. And this is because in Sweden, everyone takes July off. Like, Sweden is deserted in July, like no one works. So they were asking people. It's beautiful. It's amazing. So they were asking people to work that month, right? And me, coming from a developer mindset in Europe and working in the UK, I'm like, I'm going to take the bonus. I'm going to take the money. I'm going to work in July. But having the mentality that you can or you can't is completely up to you, depending on the circumstances. I think that's the best way to go about it. And if we don't make that deadline and we ask you to take extra time, then we push that deadline and we push the publishing date to a later date because we're not ready yet. And I think that's how we should be going forward.
Yeah, that would be great, because I agree with you that the level of inefficiency when you have massive team of people that never work with each other, which is when you need to ramp up like crazy in the crunch, people are efficient, I don't know, 10-15%. Compared to a tight core team that, they don't even have to say words sometime, and they just are a sentence and the other can finish it. Those people are 300% more efficient. So I agree that if we go in a direction that studio recognize that, it's not just for the game developers, it's also a good business model that get more out of the people that you do for the game.
Exactly.
So have a smaller team, make sure that you have the right people on the bus, get out of the wrong people on the bus, get longer period of time, and for the same budget, you'll have a way better game. I think that would be a great place to go for sure.
Completely. And you have consistency as well, right? Because if you have the same people over a certain amount of years, it means that you can actually get the next game to be as good or better than the last one. And you just keep on building.
Theoretically, I think the other part of the equation here is too, going back to the subject of how do we make games. I think as an industry we need to mature both the AA and the AAA. The AA have no choice but to be a bit more. How do I say how do I say this in a politically correct kind of fashion? But they have to be a little bit more calculated when it comes to how to make a game, because they just don't have the same kind of funds that these deep pocket AAA studios have. So they make a mistake. I mean, I've watched AAA game companies while I was there, watch millions of dollars just get burned because they're like, you know what? Nope, this game, we're just going to shut it down. Where you imagine a AA studio to try to do that, it would ruin them, because it's they put all those eggs in that one basket, right? So I think that both these groups benefit by perfecting the formula, because obviously the big AAA studios just stand to make more profit because they can bring the cost down, and the AA studios have a better chance of success, which is obviously what they're aiming for, so they can make a second game or a third and a fourth. So the idea is, in my mind, I think we're going to see, and I think this came up when we were talking to David Gibson as well, naturally, is the way you make games and as technology is now starting. I mean, we came a long way from the beginning of games. Like you pointed it out quite clearly that games are still relatively new, so it's obvious that we still don't really know exactly the best way of doing it. And part of it is evolution of accessibility into the very technical realm that is necessary to make a game, i.e., engines. So you look at you look at Unity and you look at Unreal. One of the most notable advances those two particular engines are providing is accessibility for content creators. You don't need to be a programmer. Video games, you have to remember, at the beginning, that was the domain of programmers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Programmers, and like there's a reason why programmer art is a term. It's because that's essentially what was in those games, right? There's a reason why, 8-bit graphic games didn't have to, sure, 8-bits is not a lot of work with, but an artist can be a lot more creative with it, which is why you see games like Prince of Persia, like the original one, that was a pixel-based, sprite-based game, yet it was awesome. Like, it looked great because an artist was involved, as opposed to just relying solely on an engineer, because engineers are awesome at engineering things and artists tend to be good at the other things. So my point I'm trying to make, even though I'm taking a long time to say it, is that I think that you're going to start to see more of that. I think that, and when that happens, it allows for the quick prototyping of a concept before spending all that time and money and energy committing to a product that you don't even know is valid or viable. This is the biggest problem with a lot of these companies, that they don't know yet. It takes them halfway through making the game to realize, oh Jesus, this is a dud. We can't put this out there. We have to make tear it down or make gigantic, crippling changes to the game in order to make it marketable.
And there's something else to be said about independent developers as well. This is another thing that I can see a lot, because the YouTube generation nowadays, they learn faster than anyone previous.
True.
Right?
Very true.
I was speaking with somebody.
Overload.
Oh, it's incredible. I was speaking with somebody, YouTubers called Cinematic Captures. Shout out to him if he's watching this. And he does these Star Wars shorts. He has a production in his studio. He's really relatively young, and he grabs these models and then puts them together and creates these shorts that are fan made. And he was in uni, and we're talking, and he was telling me that he was teaching the teachers more than the teachers were teaching him, because most of the information was already in YouTube, and he felt very much this was And it's funny though, because I feel like games is going the same way. First, we're getting a lot of funds out there that are made for indie developers. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's lots of people out there that get together, people that are in games that already made a bunch of money, and they go into a fund and be like, okay, just pitch us ideas, and then if you like your idea, we'll give you money for it. So that's one, quite easy to actually get in. And the second is quite easy to learn. If you actually do Unreal or Unity, it's very easy for you to learn how to not only code.
Relatively speaking, especially easier to learn.
For sure. Code or art. And you can be both in one person. There's so many indie developers out there that have made a lot of money. Super Meat Boy is a good example, right? Really made a lot of money two guys, and they just learn everything by themselves. One more artistic than other, one more engineer than other. Got together, made an amazing game, and made a lot of money from it. And I think there's something to be said about that area as well, because when you add that on top of everything we talked about, AA and AAA, I think the games industry is just bound to actually kind of excel. Just it's going to be the next big thing. Well, it's already the next big thing, but it's just going to get bigger as it goes.
And we'll see a lot of games come out that normally would never come out too, because now people could ship a game without even having necessarily a friend who's a programmer who's willing to spend the kind of time and energy that it takes to put a game out there. Like you see these games showing up now on the market that were all done with blueprints, and they may not be a gigantic AAA game, but they're a game and they're fun and they're successful and they sell money, they make money. So it just goes to show you that that's great, because that stimulates the creativity, it raises the bar across the board, and suddenly it changes the terms of engagement of the whole, just the marketplace, in video games in general.
Harvey, any thoughts on VR?
Oh boy.
Yes. I have thoughts. I have many thoughts.
Where do you see it now, and how do you see it evolve? That's a discussion I had with Brent recently, that for him, we're getting to a point that it's really maybe not mainstream yet, but getting there. And for me, I was like, I don't know. I feel it's been 5 years that we're almost there and almost there, and maybe another 5 years. Well, so where do you see it here, and when do you see it really take off in the future?
I actually don't see it taking off. I see AR. I see AR taking off, but not VR. And this controversial statement for everybody out there that actually loves VR.
Perfect. We like it. That's how we like our discussion. Explain yourself.
Because of this story, like looking back at story and at history, Valve, obviously, they were pretty much the ones that created VR, right? The guy that created VR went back to like Facebook with Oculus and all that stuff, and then now Valve has their own headsets. But Valve have been very good at doing one thing, which is set the standards for whatever new platform or whatever new genre there is out there, right? And they have a saying, and this is just my opinion, they have a saying and a stake into making VR as successful as possible, because they are all in into VR, much more even than Facebook, right? So I was waiting for Valve to create the title that was going to be the new Half-Life. You guys remember how when Half-Life came out, you just shake the whole industry to no end, and you're still feeling the ripples now. I was hoping for them to create that title that would actually do the same thing and justify to people that this is why you actually play games in VR, right?
And you don't feel like Half-Life Alyx did any of that?
And I feel like Half-Life Alyx did a little bit of that, but not enough to actually fully justify people that I need a VR headset now. Like, you know how like Nintendo Switch or like Nintendo Wii did, like this is like the nunchucks, right? Like they were a really difficult sell, but as soon as you saw the games, the Wii Sport and all this other stuff, you're like, I need one of those. And I was expecting Valve to do that for VR, and if Valve didn't do it, I don't know who's going to do it.
I almost wish this conversation started at the very beginning, because I have a lot to say about this now too. I don't know if I agree and I disagree. I think it comes down to, I personally think it comes down to the accessibility. Like it still feels a little bit daunting to put on a VR headset. You can't see what you're doing. It feels very disorienting. It's heavy still. Like they have a long way to go. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe that's what you're thinking in AR, because AR promises to be a little bit of more lightweight and a little less of that whole terrifying, like I can't see anything, because it's like, it's instead of only seeing what it wants to let you see, it merges reality with actually with something that's VR like, right?
That's it. Interesting. Exactly. And this is why I think AR has so much potential, because I feel like the people that I know that have tried VR, I including myself, and I created content for VR and all that stuff, is like they have always the two complaints, right? Like I cannot play this for too long. And games are a medium that you have to play for too long. So obviously it becomes, even if you actually want to draw or do 3D, after a while it becomes really heavy. So eventually it's going to become just like glasses. I assume so. But even then, you're completely kind of like shut off from reality to the point that it becomes this like weird after a while, right? Because you're so into it.
Yeah.
So I feel like humans, like we have a tendency to know what's going on out there. Like what is, like, can I look at what is out there?
Yeah.
So I think AR gives you the best of both worlds, where if you actually have an AR headset, there will be like glasses, let's say, then you can actually see what's in the world, but that reality gets augmented. So who's to say that you cannot play a Half-Life Alex in real life, just like you do in AR, like in VR, but in AR.
Yeah.
And I think that's a much better and much more compelling case for everybody, because then you can play with your mates, right? You can play with each other in the same room and have that GoldenEye couch playing.
The classic vision of couch co-op on GoldenEye.
Couch co-op, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think it's funny that you invoke the image of GoldenEye, because that was sort of like the golden era of the promise of what couch co-op is, and it's funny that Nintendo still seems to own that so well. Like it's like
great.
They seem to have that couch co-op thing cornered, where the other sort of competitors tend to be more about online multiplayer, where Nintendo's like, no, we still think that our system, and it's true, because it's nice, because it keeps the Nintendo system a bit more niche, which is nice. I want to so badly. I have to literally stop myself, because I want to get into this topic even more deeply, because it is so. It's a great topic. It is a good one. It's good, and because I saw a bunch of people in the chat saying, "Oh, it's really the price that's the most limiting thing," and I don't even agree with that.
Brent knows that I'm good to throw those little.
Oh yeah, good job.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's a great question. Yeah, well, I think Oculus is doing it well about having like wireless headsets, right? They don't have to have a PC and all that.
Exactly, and they have the pass-through feature too, which is sort of like I think we're both probably, if we were to talk longer about this, I think we probably have a common vision. It's just that you call it AR that's going to evolve, and I see it more like VR that evolves. It's the truth is I think they need to meet in the middle somewhere, because at the end of the day, with a pass-through feature with a headset on, if it's lighter weight, should feel like AR anyways. Because it's like looking through my mirrorless camera. You have a mirrorless camera. You're using your EOS R, right? And
exactly.
They've replaced the SLRs. Now you're just literally getting in the viewfinder. It is not an actual image of what you see through the lens. It's a digital replication. It's essentially what you're going to be taking a picture of. That is a digital viewfinder. So that in itself, you know what I mean? If cameras can make that switch, which was a scary one, because the photographic enthusiasts were really against this idea until the resolution was good enough in those viewfinders that they're like, okay, you know what? You've almost tricked my eye into thinking that what I'm seeing is actually just looking right down the lens, with all the benefits of looking from the sensor's point of view, because now you see all the depth of field, you see quite literally all of the things that you want to do, you want for composing the shot, without having to like clamp down the actual iris or anything like that.
Yeah, I think independently of what we actually end up in, I think the future is incredibly bright.
Yeah,
I think it's
going somewhere,
right?
Yeah,
it's definitely going somewhere.
That's true.
I do think that there needs to be something that actually captures the imagination of people, and that something hasn't been created yet. Either VR or AR, both of them, right? Like Microsoft does these AR headsets, and then they say you can actually read your email and you can create a virtual desk and stuff. I don't want to do that in AR.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Boring.
That is not a fantasy that I have.
But I do want to play Mario Kart like Nintendo did.
Yeah,
right. That's fun. Like that's what I want to do in AR. Sure. So it's the same thing in VR. Like I think Half-Life did a lot of things that people didn't expect, and it's much more realistic. It's much better, and they push the medium forward slightly. But it's not Half-Life leap into the future. It's not like I need to own this headset in order to play this game.
I just feel like if more people had access to the headset, they might feel a bit differently. Maybe you're like, I think the two of us, because we know VR, like we know what it has to offer, so we understand it. But like when I get my mom to wear a VR headset, she's just like, what the? It captures her. It's maybe not enough to want her to go buy one, and I think that's the main question, right?
And that's the main question. Yeah. Do you want to? Is it like Nintendo Wii worthy? Yeah. Right. Well, is it like that craze of like? Yeah. I want to buy one for myself and my kids and my mom and my auntie, like people used to do when the Wii came out, right? Yeah. That's basically what you want, because if you actually ship a VR headset like Oculus with a game that is like this game-changing game, and people get to see why this is needed, then you have an in. And I don't think we have an in yet.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyways,
And I'm not sure if this in is just going to be coming from game, because if we look at a game for it's like Fortnite, for instance, the reason why it's crack cocaine for the kids is not just the game itself.
No.
It's the
no,
social
it's the
aspect of
community,
it.
Yeah,
it's
that's
the
it.
social. Exactly.
Remove the friends,
I
remove
know.
the headset and talking. Fortnite is a completely different game that is not as popular as. So maybe it's this social aspect coming in VR, that you see your virtual avatar of your, either friends or buddies or whoever that are there, that is going to create this kind of communal connection that all of a sudden is going to make it mainstream, because it's going to bring it to another level.
Because people are talking about this virtual. You guys know Second Life?
Yeah.
Second Life is like, well, people are talking about that. Like, that's the best case scenario for a VR headset, right?
For
like
sure.
actually being there and meeting.
Yeah,
I mean, if people used to play, or still play, a World of Warcraft, and they actually used to get married and make friends, and like your social life was in the game. Right? You had to be there in order to be social. Not going to the street, but in the game. So if anyone can create that in VR, then that reality is going to become really, really nice. As long as the head is comfortable.
Like Ready Player One level, where like it is quite literally a second version of your life that you live online, and it's so believable. And a bunch of people in chat were also dropping a bunch of other barriers of entry, and another barrier of entry is obviously that there's a lot of motion sickness involved with VR, and I think that's a lot of that's technological, though. I think that it comes down to frame rates. It comes down to like we're at the start. Like all the stuff that happened before this was all the preamble, all the theory. I feel like now when you take a look at, like, say, a Quest 2 and what is soon will be the Quest 3, which is I'm sure just on the horizon. I believe that they are going to start solving some of those problems. I'd like to think, and even money, though. I mean, like, it's hard to say that money is the barrier of entry when it would cost the same amount of money or more to buy a console. And you have these Quests that are like standalone systems. You don't need to plug it into a computer. You'd have to buy either a computer or a console to play any of these other games. And so, it could be very easily justifiable to buy that instead if you're just into that kind of a type of game. But I do believe we'll see where it all goes. It's obvious that there's something there, but there's going to be software. They have to essentially prove the format, like you're saying. Some software needs to come out to make it like, oh, that's why I buy VR. It's like completely. It's impossible to deny that that's a good reason to buy a headset.
Yeah, because the software is the one that actually sells the hardware, right? It's always that way.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a doorway.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as the future doesn't look like Black Mirror, that people just disconnect and get consumed by this thing, then we are on to a good thing.
Petter in chat said, if it's also bad if you have friends who like to play pranks on you while you're playing in VR and they pull your pants down. I feel like that's less of a VR problem and more of a you chose bad friends problem.
I feel like that's a very specific example.
It's a very hyper specific example. Oh, Petter, thanks for being here, buddy. Okay, so I'm going to take a second. We have about 13 minutes left. I want to make sure that we have a chance to ask some questions that have been coming from the community. Otherwise, I will
let's do it.
Fail my duty here. So let's start with one of the ones that are in my spreadsheet here. That's a good one. We kind of touched on this a little bit. We didn't really dig in too deep, but can beginner animators start their career in video games as a cinematic animator? Is there a barrier of entry there? Is there an expectation to do something else in your mind?
No, not really. You can actually start as a cinematic animator. That's for sure. The thing is, being a cinematic animator is more akin to what a film with like an animator or VFX animator would be. So you have the linear pipeline. You still have to work with gameplay because your cinematics need to slot into gameplay. But basically the planning and the execution is very linear. So it's a good way for you to get in and get a preview of what the games industry is or how it works. However, if your ultimate goal is to be a gameplay animator, then you have to come out of that shell and just go and learn how like the engine works, implementation, separating animations, how things work under the hood. That is a bit more difficult and it takes a little longer.
But I would agree it's a great way to get through the door and be hired because you have your feature experience, cinematic, and then slowly from cutscene and scripted event and interested and eventually getting to gameplay. So
yeah, completely. Yeah, you know this, David, because you were exactly in that position, right?
That would be a great strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's a tricky one for me because the irony is that it is being a cinematic animator means that there's a lower barrier of entry when it comes to the technical side of things. It'll be a perfect gateway into games as just an animator who has pure animation skills, because it'd be a great way to be able to learn at your own rate and maybe even eventually migrate over to the gameplay department if that's something that interests you. So there's that. But I think that the thing that kind of works against you is at least from my perspective, all the game companies I've worked at, there's an expectation that the cinematic animators are some of the better animators on the team because they're able to produce highly realized, like high quality of realization to the cinematics. Not always the case. I mean, every team needs some juniors, right? So like if you're lucky enough that there's a junior role and you show some promise, then you might get your chance. So what I'm getting at is if your technical skills are a little low, but you still need to have a decent, animation skill level, so I think that you like it, and in some cases, I think you'd have an easier time getting on a television production, for instance, as a new animator than you would a cinematic job on a video game, because the expectations are high. I find on the quality.
It depends what is the task, because there's also some,
You're right.
There's some mocap cleaning that needs to be done
No,
as
you're
well.
right.
That could be another entry. Like, let's start with that, and slowly we give you shots, and so
sure. And it also depends how big the studio is, because if you start as a cinematic animator in a AAA studio, you might be stuck there without wanting to go, because gameplay animators are the ones that are the part of the core team, based on my experience. Cinematic animators are the ones that are normally can be contracted in and out, and feel slightly more disposable. So if you actually kind of like want to actually learn about animation or gameplay or whatever, then you have to actually make sure that you get in the best you can, and make sure that you have some lateral movement to actually kind of a change between cinematics and gameplay, and ask that question early on. If the opportunities there.
I have to say that's kind of true. I mean, I enjoy both sides of that equation. I really, really enjoy directing performers for cinematics, for a video game cinematics. I really, really like that part of the job. And I like just the polish that goes into making cinematics and the storytelling and the narrative. But because I've shown that I have skill and understanding in the area of gameplay mechanics, I tend to get pulled there, because there's usually a vacuum in that area. I find that there's especially finding good leads and directors in that area. People that it is hard, because I find that unfortunately many animators and animation directors before me in some of these positions have unfortunately created a bit of a bad name for that role, and that that some of them come in there and they're just like, they're just sandbagging around their animation department, protecting their animators and just trying to make the animations look really great, as opposed to focusing on making a good game and leveraging animation to make the game better, which is a completely different mindset, as I'm sure you drank that Kool-Aid a long time ago, otherwise you wouldn't enjoy the job that you do. But but not everyone gets that, right? And a lot of animators don't get that too. But so it's super important to have someone like someone who's in a leadership position on the team who definitely gets that, so that they can help shape the culture of other animators that are also setting out to do the same thing. Reminding them that it's about the game. Make sure that the feature is fun and is awesome and it satisfies. Yes, sure, the animation is a big part of satisfying the player fantasy.
Feel good.
For sure. But but it can't suck to play. If it's too slow, it's too slow, and it's going to be annoying. So it's yes, that's a really good piece of advice there. The idea of choose your industry well too. So if you want to have a bit more of a generalized, be exposed to more things, look for maybe the smaller companies, because it's going to be expected of you to do a little bit of everything, and it's a good way to sort of cut your teeth and really understand the industry and pick what part of the job you like the most before you try to move into a bigger company. It's a good one. I got another one here. Oh, Dave, you were going to say something?
Well, there's a pretty interesting one that was just posted
in chat.
In chat, yeah. So, any thoughts you think VR with Maya? Because we've been talking about VR as video game, but there might be other application. So, do you think that it could be a tool of creation for artists, or digital artists, or animators to use it to be in Maya and manipulate their character directly?
Yeah, it's funny they asked that, because Maya 2022 actually has like a separate package now that you can actually draw right in VR, which is really, really cool. Now, I think manipulating characters and animating in 3D, because of the amount of time that you spend just creating a pose, you probably get to about 2 or 3 poses, and then you probably want to put the VR headset down because it takes so long for you to do that, right?
Yeah, it's true.
So unless you have, instead of having the controllers, unless you have actually fingers that you can pull things and move things around, and it's easier to move in 3D. I think animating in 3D or in VR, I think is very far away from what it is now. I think drawing is easier because you can manipulate, rotate the area and draw, but animating probably a bit more difficult.
It's an interesting one because I mean it's very meta to think that you'd be making a VR game while in VR. Like it's like what the and it's possible. And you can, like, for instance, Unreal allows you, they have the tools. There's a tool set in Unreal where you can literally develop the game in VR. You know, like you could be doing level design and placing all the bits and pieces. And that's an experience. If you've never tried that before, you should. I think that the interesting thing when it comes to animating, I agree with you, because it would feel more like it'd be almost like stop motion animation. So the rigs would have to also lend themselves to that sort of experience. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to be in VR trying to grab little handles and move. Like it would be annoying. But if I could feel like I could grab an arm and just move it like I could like a little maquette, then okay, then you know what, sign me up for that experience. Which is why I think if you're interested in this space at all, you should definitely check out Quill. Quill is a VR software that it's not the same. They don't even have Quill for the VR standalone. It's only for PC right now. But they have Pixel Shift, which is I think is that Google's Pixel. Is it called? Is it Pixel Shift? So it's
I think it's Google.
Yeah. So but it doesn't let you animate in there. Where Quill on the PC does. And if you've ever experienced any of these beautiful hand sketched and hand animated sequences that are in VR from Quill, you need to check them out because they are on another level. But how that would translate into a game is a little bit out of my scope of understanding. It feels very like an artistic expression as more so than the technical aspects that go into making game animation.
Yeah, exactly. There's a good animator, a Disney animator called Daniel Peixe. He actually does these beautiful animations in Quill. In 3D. He's a beautiful, like a great animator, and he does beautiful work. But yeah, he's almost like akin to Okami. I don't know if you guys remember this game. Like the wolf. It feels exactly. It feels like painting. Almost like painting, like Japanese painting.
Yep, totally.
So it looks really beautiful. Creating a full game like that in VR, guaranteed someone is going to do that at some point, and it's going to be an amazing achievement because it's going to take quite a while to actually do it. But I think it's definitely doable. The tools are there. They're just clunky at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see. I'm excited to see where it goes because we're seeing more and more of these softwares try to adopt it, as we see now Autodesk with Maya trying to do exactly the same thing. Although it's not really an interface for Maya. Isn't it kind of almost like a standalone thing?
It's like a standalone thing, yeah.
It's like, because Autodesk made Sketchbook, which is an Autodesk product that is for like tablet drawing and stuff like this. So it's probably like, it sounds like Autodesk's their contribution to the competitive market that Pixel Shift and Quill live in. Because I mean, obviously they see that as a market that's going to grow. We'll see.
Completely.
I got another one here from my spreadsheet. We got like time for maybe 1 or 2 more, and then we're gonna have to call it a day.
Then after that, there's sorry, Brent. Then after that, there's another good one from chat. So let's go with two last.
Okay, so one from here, and then one from chat. Okay, perfect. So I have one here from Old Man Skippy 38, which I thought was kind of interesting. In an interview, when asked, and this is a good one because it speaks to the culture of video game production. So I think it's really good for people to hear this one. In an interview, when asked, quote unquote, what game are you playing? Is it okay to say I put down the controller a while ago to working on my own projects, but still enjoy watching playthroughs and keeping up with the industry? This is such a such a specific question. And I mean, I really feel like this question comes from experience. I like it too. It's a good one. Let us discuss.
Okay. Cool. Let us discuss. That's a good one. So I think based on my experience, like you need to really play games. Because here's the thing about the games industry. Game development is a really long process. So whenever you get hired into the games industry, it is about your talent, but that's about 60%, 70% of what gets you in. The rest is about your personality and what kind of player or person you are. And can I work with you for the long run without wanting to actually strangle you after 3 months, right? Is it something that I can see you like hanging out? Can we be friends, right? So when you come into the interview, one of the first things they will ask you is what kind of games you're playing. And that question it actually goes deeper than just saying,
way deeper.
I like Uncharted.
True.
That's it. Because what happens is that if you can like make a conversation with a person about like the games, and you have some games in common, and you understand what they're trying to say, and with the passion for the game and why they like it, and how deep, how many hours they played, all of that stuff, you can connect. If I'm the developer and I'm interviewing you, I can connect with your passion, because maybe I'm not playing anymore, but if you're playing it and it's a game that we do in our company, let's say a Battlefield when I was working at DICE, and you show me your interest and you know the weapons and you know the lore and you know all that stuff, that to me tells me that this guy is not only going to be a good animator, but also understands what we're on about, and he's going to be here for the long run, right? So this is why it's so important. And the other side of the question as well is that the technicalities of games. If you actually are talking about games and you understand how games are made and you understand what makes them a good game and the mechanics of the game, then it means that it's going to be very easy for you to learn about like how to actually add things to Unreal, and how to understand game animation systems, and how to talk with coders and engineers about certain things that you need to do, and explain to them why you want to do them, right? Because if you can explain to me why Overwatch has really awesome mechanics whenever they shoot or whenever they jump or whatever, then it means that you can explain to a coder, to an engineer, why these mechanics that we want to implement will actually be good in game. So this is why it's so important for you to actually continuously play games and dissect them as well, and analyze them. Because if you do, then you're going to have an in. With that in the talent, you're going to have an in into the games industry.
Yeah, it's like part of the question is, yes, it's sort of a personality test, but I agree. It's also, do you understand the culture of games?
What you're trying to
do you understand the product we're making? Like, why would I hire you to help design a race car if you don't even like driving, you don't even have a license? Why would I do that?
Yeah, you're basically saying like, it's a nice car, I don't know how it's made, but I'd like to help you to do it.
Exactly. So like, that's really what they're trying to get down to. And even if you don't need to be a pro, but what you need to be able to do is express yourself, because they're also testing your ability to collaborate and explain your point of view, right? So when they ask you, okay, what game are you playing? And you're like, Uncharted. And then they go, well, what about Uncharted do you like so much? Why do you keep playing it? And if you don't have an answer for that, then it sort of makes them sort of wonder like, well, do you understand? Like, I need you to know why that game is so good. Because if you don't know, then how are you going to be a useful person on my production floor and speak up during meetings and go, hey, I don't think this is going to be very much fun, because I saw that in a game the other day and that game flopped hard. And I think it's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. So it's like we depend on one another on those production floors to keep everyone in check and to like make sure that someone doesn't spend too much time navel gazing their really cool idea. We always have to reflect on we're not making this game for us. We're making it for a greater group of people than it is gamers in general. And like, obviously, we need to always keep them in mind, and we need to always remember what works and what doesn't work when we see what's going on in the marketplace.
For sure.
Yeah. No, it's a funny one, because this one does come up, and a lot of people are kind of put off by those kind of questions. I think in interviews, there's like, well, it seems kind of like, seems almost cult-like that they want to talk about video games. Like, well, no, it would be the same thing. It's like if you were getting a job at
If you actually go to a film studio,
exactly,
it doesn't matter what it is.
You don't
guarantee they'll ask you about actors and directors and who's the producer, and why do you like it, and cinematography. And you have to know these things, because if you don't know these things and you just say, I just want to work for your studio, but I don't know anything about movies, then what does it say about you? Right.
Yeah. And it also makes me, I've seen like retention's a problem. Like if I have someone at the table that's asking, they're convinced they want to be a game animator, but they don't even play games. How do I know that I'm not going to invest a ton of time and energy into training you up? And then you just are like, you know what? I don't really like this very much. It's because you didn't know anything about it. And you never even spent any time thinking about what that job was before you even applied, yet you were very convinced that you wanted it. It's like, it says volumes about you if you go to the table and you're not even passionate about the thing that you're saying that you want to get a job to do.
And one last thing, like, I actually think that things have changed. I tell this to my students all the time. Things have changed dramatically from before. When I started, I actually submitted like a film showreel, and with a film showreel, you could get into the game studio with no problem, because games was seen as this secondary thing that people would actually go to whenever you don't get into Pixar or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
Hilarious.
So yeah, that was games back then.
Yeah,
but now,
not anymore.
Now is the opposite, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone that wants to be an animator nowadays wants to actually get into games. Or if you play games, if you're a gamer, then normally you want to be a gameplay animator. And I see that all the time in my channel and my students and all that stuff. So what this has created is that the games industry now are very specific on who they hire, because now they are spoiled for choice. So if you're just an animator that actually wants to work in film and you happen to apply for a gameplay studio because you thought that's going to be an easy in, it's not going to work out for you, because exactly all these things that we're talking about. Because it's not only about your showreel showcasing that you actually want to do gameplay animation, but it's also you as a person. How passionate are you about games, and how can you explain to me certain things about games? If you have those two things, then you're definitely going to be in. You're going to be through that interview. But if you actually apply with a showreel that is generic and has the regular walk cycle and like acting shot and stuff, and then you get to ask an interview, and then they bring you over and they ask you about what games do you play, and you go like, I don't really have a console. I used to play when I was a child, but I don't play anymore. That's going to be very difficult to sell.
Yeah, really. And I mean, go ahead, David.
No, I was going to segue to the next question. So
go ahead. Yeah, we could probably linger on this forever because that
was the perfect segue, and that's a question that I think is going to bring a lot of value to the community when we talk about recruiting. What are some things that you expect or like to see in the demo reel for game animation? Do you have tips to stand out? So a show reel that would be specific. I love game. I want to do. What do you want to see in a show reel for someone that would want to do gameplay animation?
Yeah, that's a great question again. So, by the way, I'm super yellow. I'm sorry about that. It's my light. I don't have my lights on.
I thought you were.
I'm not this yellow. Yeah, no. So like, I think what you have to, going back to that idea that you need to actually set your show reel or create your show reel specific for games. Creating a gameplay show reel, you need to actually think. I go into this in my videos. Think about animation systems and how they are broken down, I think. And if you have like specific shots, it's fine. A walk cycle, a run cycle and stuff, it's fine, but it's going to come across as a generic show reel. What you can do for a gameplay show reel is start breaking down specific motion in body mechanics. So you can actually get a walk cycle that goes into a run cycle, that goes into a jump, that goes into a punch, and it goes into a landing. But when you actually do those things, make sure that you actually leave some time in between, add some graphics on top with an X and Y, add some like arrows that you have to do, because what that would tell me as a developer is that this person not only did the animations, but they are also thinking about animation systems. They are thinking that when I press X, the character does this motion. When I press forward, the character does this other motion. And when I land, I can land this in this cool way, recoil, and go back to idle. That means that you are thinking about animation systems and thinking about animation in a systematic way, because this is what games are about, right? It's about breaking down systems, and this animation fits within this system, and then this other animation fits within this other system. So if you can actually portray that, it doesn't have to be rendered, it doesn't have to be in Unreal. You can just make it in Maya and make it believe. But the most important thing is for us to understand that you are thinking about it that way, because if you have a show reel that way, that is broken down in those kind of ways, first-person animations, third-person animations, doesn't matter what it is. When you send that show reel in and we ask you over for an interview, guaranteed we're going to ask you, so how would you think this would work? And what inspired you to create these motions, right? Most likely, Prince of Persia, or, I don't know, Uncharted, or whatever it was, right? And then we can actually start a conversation about exactly why you actually got this inspiration and what works, what doesn't, all that stuff. And that stuff is great. Saves a bunch of time and stands out amazingly from all the other show reels that I'm
totally agree. It's a great conversation starter, because just like you said, that's exactly what would happen is I would have you in for an interview, but the reason why you're getting pulled in is because you've intrigued me. It's like it's like a signature that you ended at the end of your demo reel that essentially is like a secret handshake that says, I get it. I understand that games are made up of multiple little puzzle pieces, and the gestalt is the game, but I understand that my job is to make the little parts that make the game. And I'm just trying to broadcast that. Just by the way you say that in a very subtle way on the reel is enough to make me go, okay, because next to that reel is usually just the typical, a bunch of game cycle, like just a bunch of run cycles and just these animations that I'm looking at right away going, that would never fit into a game because of this, this, and this. And this is the thing. It's like just the fact that you're thinking on that level immediately means that you're much more hireable right off the bat, because you're ready to be entering that into the world of making a game.
Yeah, and something else to add, and this is independently if it's for games or film. people want to be entertained. And this is more important than people might think, but it's true. And this is everybody, including ourselves. So me as a director, David, Brent, most likely, if you're looking at any show reel whatsoever, it needs to be entertaining. Because we go through so many show reels, like daily.
Totally. It's true.
So many show reels.
It's so
they
true.
all start looking the same.
Please.
Yeah, they all start looking the same.
Cut us a break.
Whenever you actually find a show reel that actually catches your eye and you're like, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
Starts well. And if you can actually at least get the person to kind of go, this is interesting, then they will actually look at your second shot. And the second shot maybe like allows them to see this third shot, and so on and so forth until they get to the end of the show reel. If you make it to the end of the show reel, then it means that you are in for a treat, because people are intrigued about certain pieces, how you created certain things, and the timing and the spacing. And this animation has a lot of punch. This one doesn't, for these reasons. And you start analyzing things, because everyone does that in animation. You start analyzing things, and you start looking at the show reel like you used to when you were a student, when you used to see someone really good animating. And that's what I know that is an animator that I want to hire, because I'm starting to like pick on things that I like and I dislike. And that is cool, because now you have my attention, because you made me see your show reel. I'm enjoying your show reel. And then I'm trying to think about what kind of things can I extrapolate from this that are useful to me in my company as a director. Can I hire this guy now? And that's all you need. You just need entertainment and making sure that people can see your work and feel intrigued about it. Because then that will start a conversation. And it might end up with nothing, but at least you get people's attention. And that's the most important thing.
That's good advice. Just pique someone's curiosity. Do something that surprises them, because at the end of the day, Dave, 100% Harvey's right. Like, we animators are many things, but one of the things at the very top of all that pyramid of things is we're entertainers. We are there to make sure that we cannot forget that element of our job. And so if you can't entertain the person who's looking at reel, which I agree is maybe a bit of a tougher crowd because they're looking at reels probably all day, but if you can find a way of cracking the code and doing something fresh, something that will at least make them go, hey, what the heck? And then we got to deliver the goods. It can't just be something that surprises and then you just drop the ball. It's got to be catch my attention and then show me you know what you're talking about, and then you're probably going to at least get a call for an interview.
I think, Brent, we should do a 1 hour stream of how to properly do a show reel that will have
not a bad idea.
You all the chance in the world to
that is a good idea. Yeah,
not a bad idea. Okay, it's 11 minutes actually over. I don't want to overstay our welcome. Harvey, thank you very much for being here today.
This was a lot of fun.
It's always nice to get to know a bright mind like yours and understand what motivates you. I mean, there's lots of things I wanted to get into. There's lots of really good questions here that ended up coming up. But I just have to hope that we can convince you to come back on another day and we can continue the conversation.
Anytime, guys. Anytime. Awesome. This was a lot of fun. This is great. Just chatting with you guys about animation. Always awesome. So feel free to hit me up anytime.
Okay, perfect. Well,
Awesome.
we'll do that. So thank you, David. Thank you, Harvey. See you on the next one. And have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day. And Harvey, good evening to you, sir.
Oh, yes, exactly. Time to go to bed.
Cheers. See you guys.
See you.
Okay, so thank you very much to everyone in chat who did show up. As usual, there was lots of great questions and we didn't get to all of them. So we're going to try to figure out a way of maybe trying to keep these questions somehow on record so we can always follow up on them in some way, in some clever way, kind of following up on these streams, because we're introducing you to these really great people, this experienced, wise minds of the animation industry. It's nice to be able to like pick their brain forever, because obviously they are fountains of good advice and information. But there's only so much time of the day, and all good things come to an end for now. Until next time, thanks again for showing up, and we'll see you next week for yet another conversation with. Cheers.